All right, want to get to the rails, of course, which has been something we've been following.
Here is the host of the Faber Report, David Faber.
Thank you, Johnny Gilbert. Always appreciate that. It is, well, a lot more going on there. Yesterday, we heard from the Surface Transportation Board, of course, ruling on this very important potential component of CNI, of Canadian National's ability to acquire Kansas City Southern, which it is in a deal to acquire as of still this moment. But the STB ruling was, well, it was a no-doubter. Unanimous, and they were basically like, no way. No way. We don't see this as something that is in the public interest at this point, and they ruled against it. We got a little language from them that we can share at this point with you. They simply say the proposed use of a voting trust would not be consistent with the public interest. Applicants have failed to establish that their use of a voting trust would have public benefits. The board finds that using a voting trust would give rise to potential public interest harms relating to both competition and divestiture. I can tell you people close to Canadian National somewhat surprised by the deal. Not that many others are surprised, because there had been a general view that it might be difficult to get through, but the ruling itself and the way it was stated, will they actually appeal, of course, becomes a question. I'll get to that in a moment. What the voting trust would have allowed, of course, is the risk to be borne by Canadian National itself, as opposed to the shareholders of KCS while they wait for antitrust approval for a deal. Now, Kansas City finds itself in a position where its board is going to have to potentially talk to Canadian National. That's what they say they're doing. They're supposed to have a meeting, or I should say a vote on said deal as of September 3rd. That has now been adjourned at this point. We don't know when they will hold a vote, but in the interim, they are going to be talking to Canadian National, trying to see what, if anything, can be done here. Now, one key is whether Canadian National will choose to potentially appeal, and what that would mean for the way Kansas City Southern's board views a potential deal, or its willingness to hang around, postpone. Right now, they have a February drop dead. That's when the merger agreement would expire. Or do they, as also seems potentially likely at this point, go back to Canadian Pacific, which has the alternate bid, lower though it is in value, and say, we see the risk on your deal, because you can use a voting trust, as far less, and therefore likely or reasonably likely to lead to a superior proposal, and therefore they reopen negotiations with CP. That would seem to certainly be something that very well might happen here. Another question for Canadian National is whether they will really try to say, hey, you know what, we're willing to increase the termination fee, the reverse breakup fee, significantly. We're also willing to top up our offer to allow for the more time that it will potentially take as we extend the merger agreement well beyond February of next year. Give us a chance. Take your risk. It seems highly unlikely that Kansas City Southern's board would be willing to do that. And by the way, CN is also under pressure here because it has an activist shareholder in its ranks in the form of TCI, Chris Hahn, not an insignificant force in that world. They own 5.2%, and they made no bones about it, saying in a letter, and I think we have that as well, that proceeding without a voting trust by Canadian National would be reckless, irresponsible, and massively value destructive. The board must understand the rules have changed. The old rules don't apply. There's no way you can have any confidence in how the new merger rules will be interpreted. This is by the DOJ they're talking about as well, because they've never been used before. Therefore, given there is such uncertainty around the approval process, it would be negligent to make a higher offer and demand billions more and everything else. And in fact, they actually say they want the CEO potentially replaced. I would point out, importantly, and Leslie, you know this as well, they own more of CP than they do of CN. Percentage-wise, where are they? At like 9+% of Canadian Pacific shares. So 8.4% of Canadian Pacific shares. So that's an important point there. They would benefit in their position there as a result of a potential deal that they feel would be more positive